The system is rigged, but here's how young people can escape. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth, and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, we have a very special guest. A lot of you will know Isaac from our Beyond the Block episodes that we do each month, but I just needed to get him here to have a conversation that I think is really important because it's something that I'm quite passionate about, this idea of how you can escape this rat race. How are you going today, Isaac?
Yeah, not too bad. Definitely put a lot of work into this so we can get a good outline of what's currently affecting the youth and what they can do about it. Because there is a pathway forward, and it does seem a bit complex on the outside, but I'm going to lay it all out today.
And that's what I love because you're not even just talking about young people. And of course, everyone either has young people in their life if they've got kids or relatives, or they know young people who at least say they're struggling. But you're probably a really good example of this, of someone who's gone, well, hang on, I want to get out of this situation myself. So you go do the work, you go do a bit of research, figure out what's involved, and then put it together and start to come up with your own strategies around that. And that's what I love about how you approach all of this. But particularly today, let's just start off with this idea of young people finding it hard. Why are they finding it hard?
There's multiple reasons why they're finding it hard, and I would say a lot of the big reasons, and one of the ones that we cover in the episodes we do, is the fact that the money supply in the world, well, you could also say global liquidity too, is increasing at a rapid rate. And what happens when this happens is the prices of assets just keeps climbing. Now, this is a really big problem because if you don't own those assets, well, then you're not able to build wealth because you're always on a treadmill trying to catch up while these accelerate. So let's just say you have a house, right, which was $400,000 before the COVID. Now, after that, we've seen house prices, well, some of 50%, even more than that. And on a nominal value, that's insane. And it's really inflated and made, well, how much longer you have to work to acquire an asset for a young person much longer, and almost makes it demotivates a lot of people, and it's really bad. But I'm going to try and there is a few ways you can sort of keep up, and I'm not going to say you can. It's not going to be easy, and it never has been easy. But there is certainly methods you can do to acquire assets that are, let's just say, not as expensive as houses that can help you.
Well, and it's a really important point that you make around the idea that people feel they give up, or for me, it comes down to this word of hope. I think that the most dangerous thing in this, when you've got a cost of living crisis for young people in particular, is if they lose hope. Because if they don't have hope, then they go, well, I can never get out of this situation. I can never afford education. I can't afford health insurance. I can't afford all these things that you sort of feel like you need to be able to survive today. I mean, that's a real problem for people, I think.
Oh, it's huge, and it also has, not that we're going to go into this specifically today, but it has a lot of societal impacts. And you're seeing this in other countries too, where corporatization, monetize, like monopolies, sports. Let's take a country like Japan and Korea too. We're seeing societal shifts. We're seeing plummeting birth rates. But even Elon Musk is talking about all these different things. And is that a is that because of assets and young people can't get in markets? I think it's got to do with it, and I think the system is fundamentally flawed with fiat currency. And we know that Bitcoin is a way that can safeguard those assets, or the cash that you have saved, and put it into an asset that is divisible and that is portable. All these different things which you'll go into, and has that utility and the value and store value. So sort of like gold in a way.
Hmm. And I mean, obviously, that's the destination we're going to end up in this conversation. But I know you look a lot at things that are really causing this inflation, and you've mentioned a few of them already, where we've talked about the quantitative easing that's going on, central banks, all this stuff that is probably over the head of a lot of people. It's something you understand because you've put some research in. But how do you really simplify that for people who might be watching this and going, well, I don't understand all the economic stuff. I just know that things aren't going great for me personally. What's your like bigger picture overview of how it all fits together there?
I think the easiest way to view it is there's a lot of debt in the system, and the government, well, it's a credit based system. So if you watch a lot of Ray Dalio's Ray Dalio stuff. He's done a very good video on this system, and it's very credit based. When you have, I think it was 70% of the money supply is credit. So when you have a system like that, that favors people who have assets because they can then take on more debt too, which then fuels this cycle, which elevates things to it's a boom and bust cycle, which we've obviously know and experience it. And we've seen that through we've seen a lot of few cycles already. But what this creates is accelerations, then booms and busts, but it's trending upwards in terms of difficulty. And we've been able to see that in terms of how many years you have to work just to get a house, just to get a loan, just to get a mortgage. So I think if you're not well versed in this space, view it as the amount of money in the system, and that's fueled by credit, and it just keeps going up. And if you don't have assets you can then use to then borrow, to then partake in this system, well, then it's going to be very hard for you. And there's obviously more caveats to it, but I would say the running theme would be that. And that's why those who are rich, well, throughout the past too, have continued to maintain that and get more wealthy, especially through COVID. And that was a exemplification of what I just said, where you had a bunch of money injected into the system. And if you go on Forbes, you're able to see those net worths of a lot of those individuals and or companies and people who hold assets just skyrocket. And that was through the introduction of lower interest rates, more credit in the system, all these different types of mechanisms which make it more debt-based, which then that money ends up funneling back into those who have the assets.
So if you think about it, like if you watch on social media or you have these conversations with other people, we use the word at the start, rigged, right? Like the game seems like it's rigged. It certainly does. But do you think that it is actually rigged here? Has it always been rigged this way? Like how do you approach that when people ask you? So when young people ask you and say like, well, if it's a rigged game, we can't win. Like, has it always been that way? And that's really what's always divided the people who've managed to break out of that and the people who haven't? Or has something really changed in your mind recently?
I think that's a very good point. I think in terms of it being rigged, I think all throughout history we've seen collapses, we've seen rises and collapses of different empires and different monetary systems being used. And I think we're just going through one of those systems right now, and it's heavily credit based. Throughout history, it's always been that way too, but we're seeing it on a global scale too. We haven't yet had this gigantic crash, and a lot of people are calling for it. And I know it does seem like it will happen inevitably with the debt situation in America and all these different types of things. But in terms of is it inherently rigged, I don't think it's inherently rigged. I just think it's the mechanisms which are playing out, which are funneling this way. I think, and also think using game theory too, monopolization of resources and assets and business is obviously going to happen once everything's destroyed and you build back up. The ones who are efficient, the ones who own the things, the ones who have the tools, well, they're going to end up winning. It's like when you play Monopoly and you roll the dice, and before you know it, one guy owns all the hotels and you just can't beat him. So it sort of seems like that, and that can be viewed as rigged. But I just think that's the way things always tend to head once development takes place and once those who have their infrastructure set up and once they're tied and works out. So if you're young, it does seem like it's rigged. But if you're at the top, it doesn't seem like it's rigged because you're probably just going to be thinking, oh, everything's all good. This is how it's been. It's easy. It's also like success bias in a way. But for the vast majority of people, I would say their current view, let's just say you're trapped in a rent cycle, you're trapped in a cycle where you're living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, it absolutely seemed like it's rigged. But rather than seeing like it's rigged, I think a logical view would just understand what is the current system, how does it work? And I don't think it's rigged. I just think this is where it tends to lead rather than some entity controlling everything to make it this way.
Yeah, and that I'm really glad you answered it that way because that was what I was sort of probing around. A lot of people, I think, jump straight to everything's a conspiracy, and I'm not suggesting that there's not things that definitely are conspiracies in this case, but I think a lot of the way the system is now, there was no conspiratorial nature of it. It's just poor systems over a long period of time that ultimately are heading towards collapse. And when you understand the basics of that, you go, yeah, well, it's pretty straightforward why that's the case. Which actually leads me to the next thing I want to ask you about, which is, if people have traditionally used methods to get ahead, do those methods work anymore in your mind? And specifically, I'm asking this because if I think about if you're a young person, you go, okay, I want to try and figure this out. Do you go and read Warren Buffett, right? Do you look at systems that worked in the past, this is obviously leading to the Bitcoin sort of angle. Do you need to be looking at modern things that are more relevant in a modern environment where you've got really that debt situation, everything you talked about hasn't been the case historically?
Yeah, and I don't think past ways will work the same way as they have. I think like the foundation works the same in terms of work hard and your life will be better, but I don't think it's going to pay off in the same way. And we can see that in terms of how much harder it is to acquire assets. Because at the end of the day, and we've spoken about this too, it boils down to asset price inflation. Like the price of bananas is really irrelevant when a house has gone up XYZ. You know what I mean? That's what holds wealth ultimately is going to be an asset rather than, well, not saying a banana holds value or whatever. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So people, there's two types of inflation. There's the CPI. It's like the consumer basket, and then there's assets. And the ones who are wealthy are the ones who own the assets. But in terms of like at times changing, I absolutely think they are, and especially with the introduction of AI. Even me, I've had to like seriously reconsider what do you do going forward? Because from a viewpoint of, and I know no one wants to hear this, but especially going to university too, I see it firsthand. Everyone's using AI to do their assignments. If you're not using AI to help you with your, at least help you, well, it doesn't seem right because everyone else is using it. So therefore, the GPAs are going to be higher because everyone's using something that has access to the knowledge base of the internet. So you kind of are forced to go on this treadmill in a way. And it does change how you perceive meritocracy, how you perceive hard work, and how you perceive intellectual property and all that sort of stuff, like learning. Is it different when AI knows everything already? Then it sort of disenfranchises you. And I've sort of went through a bit of that, but I'm sort of navigating through that. And something that young people will have to navigate. Every generation has their own issues they've got to figure out. But I don't think traditional pathways will work the same way they did, and that's why I have an answer for it.
And that answer, like the Bitcoin case, obviously you believe that this is a pathway forward, particularly for young people who can. And the reason I say this actually is because of the ability to have time on your side to handle the volatility. So it's not necessarily for everyone that solution, I assume, would be part of what you say.
Yeah, it's not. It's absolutely not for everyone. And I can say that anecdotally, talking to my friends, who are not in the space that of interest that I'm in with this, they have a lot of them don't really have that interest in it. But I think eventually, once well, we're still young, like we're in our 20s, but once time goes on a little bit more, they'll start to realize the importance of it when you're trapped in a continuous, perpetual cycle of not owning anything, which sort of goes into the you'll own nothing and be happy, which might be apparent for people who don't pay attention. I think it's very important to be paying attention, especially when you're young. And if you're oblivious to it, then that's to your own detriment. But I try to educate where I can, and especially like today, educating on well what you can do because obviously when you're like this age, you can't just go get a house, right? So you got to park your money somewhere. The money that you are able to save, you got to park that active income into an asset which is able for you to get, like Bitcoin, like gold too, precious metals, all those different types of things, even stocks. But you got to be careful which stock you get because that could
So
have some serious
how do you view the
ramifications.
risk angle of that with the age? If you think about for young people, how do you judge that? What's your construct around risk there? Because I tend to think that the more risk, the better. Almost the younger that you are, because you can afford to take those risks. Obviously, they need to be educated risks that you're taking, but you're never going to get those huge returns with a traditional stock portfolio if the world is going the way that you're talking about.
Well, the fact is, like, if you're just buying Bitcoin blindly, you don't know what you're doing. You actually might do all right, but I think it's important that you need to know the fundamentals of what's actually happening behind the scenes logically, and then you can run to the conclusions that we're going into right now. But in terms of the risk, when you're young, that's when you can afford to take the most risk, like you just said, and you need to be in the horse that has the most risk and the most logical sense in terms of are we going to appreciate, and it does. And we've done extensive videos on this, which people can go and take a look at, which I can't go into exactly right now. But when you're young, you have to take that risk, whether it's well, it applies to anything in life. If you want some upside return, or also downside too. I'm not saying things can't go bad, but using the data and timing things correctly, there's a very, very high chance things will work out in your favor, especially if you invest in these types of assets. Because here's the thing: if you just save in cash, well, that's a risk too. and you know what your risk is. You're just losing your money. You're getting devalued. So every single year you're saving in this asset that's just getting debased as the government just more money's in the system. So that's also a huge risk too. That's also a time risk. It's time opportunity, all these different types of things, but people don't really factor in.
Well, because I think probably the biggest risk for a lot of young people is that they don't even think about it at all, and it's down the track. I mean, not that's probably not fair to say they're not thinking about it at all, because they are thinking about it very much in their personal situation, but they think, I won't take any steps to accumulate anything because it's all a bit too hard. Do you want to wrap this up maybe with some closing advice, or potentially around mindset? I think this is probably the most important part here, because this doesn't just apply to young people as well. I know plenty of people at
Yeah.
all different ages who struggle with this concept of what mindset you need to actually get out of the situation that you're in and improve your situation. I would argue that you've worked very extensively on your mindset to think about how you were going to do that and the steps that you're going to take. Let's wrap it up with some ideas around that from you.
I would say in terms of how you view it logically, because I like to approach everything through logic. You have to be long term. If you're young, you have to be long term. And as someone who's done a long bunch of analysis, technical analysis, all these different types of things, short term trading, all this stuff, it's better to just be a long term investor if you're not going to be staring at the charts all day every day. Because most people don't want to do that, and it's not going to be like feasible for them to do that. So rather than do all this short term stuff, which I've seen so many people get wiped out from it, don't do that and just be a long term investor. Have that mindset. You're just going to be doing this for the long run. And here's the harsh reality about life. People in my age bracket, we might be moving out of home later. That's just a fact you have to submit to. It might happen, and you're gonna have to deal with that. And another thing in terms of mindset is not everything's going to work out the way you want. And I know young people don't want to hear that, but it's something that has to be said, right? But there's things you can do in your immediate time to make things better and plan for the future. I view it as planting seeds. So if you're buying Bitcoin and buying silver and setting yourself up, well, you're planting a seed for later down the track. Things might, well, they should. I would say there's a high probability, because otherwise you're planting in cash, which is getting devalued. So it's the inverse bet to me.
Look, I appreciate so much you coming on here today and having this conversation, Isaac, because obviously we bring you on for your technical analysis skills, because they're very good when we look at Bitcoin, and we do that Beyond the Block episode each month. But there's a lot more value there from that people can emulate, following, particularly young people, following sort of the path that you've taken, where you just go, look, I need to be into this stuff. I need to learn more about it. I need to have a go at it. So, I really congratulate you on that, because I think that's a really important thing to do. And really appreciate your time today. And I think people will value hearing your thoughts on that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. I enjoyed the chat.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.